Welcome to the HFY Tales channel. Remember to like and subscribe if you like the story. Enjoy and take care. The dense jungle canopy loomed overhead, its thick foliage blocking out the twin suns that burned high in the alien sky. Lieutenant David Ward moved swiftly, his boots sinking slightly into the damp, moss-covered ground as his squad advanced. Sweat dripped down his neck, but he didn't slow down. The mission was too critical. "Stay sharp," David whispered into the comms. "We've got movement up ahead." His voice was calm, practiced, even as his heart pounded in his chest. After years in the Galactic Resistance Forces, David had learned that fear never truly went away. It just became background noise, a hum you learned to live with. His squad, a group of hardened veterans and a few wide-eyed rookies, followed close behind, weapons at the ready. They were on a reconnaissance mission deep within enemy territory, here to gather intel on the Oslian forces, a warlike alien race that had swept across several star systems in their campaign for dominance. The Resistance had fought them at every turn, but victory was often elusive. The Oslian Empire was technologically advanced and ruthlessly efficient in battle. The humans, by comparison, were seen as underdogs, scrappy, resourceful, but ultimately weaker in the eyes of most galactic civilizations. David had grown used to the scoffs of other alien species who doubted humanity's ability to survive the conflict, let alone turn the tide of war. But he'd seen firsthand the strength of the human spirit, the determination to survive. That was why he was still here, in the thick of it, leading his men through the unknown. "We've got contact," came a sharp voice over the comms. It was Private Thompson, one of the new recruits, her voice trembling slightly. "Hostiles at R12. David's grip tightened around his rifle as he crouched low, signaling his squad to halt. From their vantage point, he saw them, Oslian soldiers, heavily armored, moving with the predatory grace of born warriors. They were searching for something, or someone. "We're not here for a fight," David muttered under his breath. "We're just observers." But the galaxy had other plans. An explosion rocked the jungle, the ground shaking beneath their feet as a firefight erupted between Oslian forces. David's eyes widened in surprise. An Oslian ambush unit had attacked another Oslian patrol. It made no sense. He motioned for his squad to retreat, but it was too late. In the chaos, they were spotted. "Engage," David ordered as blaster fire filled the air. His men moved like a well-oiled machine, returning fire as they fell back. But the odds were against them. The Oslian soldiers were numerous and relentless, their weapons far superior to the standard human issue. David gritted his teeth as one of his men fell, a bright flash of light marking the end of another life. His heart sank, but there was no time to mourn. He had to keep moving, had to keep his squad alive. Amidst the chaos, something caught his eye. A group of Oslian soldiers, distinct from the rest, engaged in a fierce battle near a fallen figure. It wasn't until David saw the gleaming insignia on the soldier's chestplate that he realized who it was. Prince Azark of the Oslian Empire. The prince was a name David had heard whispered in fear and awe. He was known as one of the finest warriors of the Oslian race, a paragon of their honor-bound traditions, and now, here he was, surrounded and overwhelmed by his own people. David's instincts screamed at him to keep running, to retreat while he still had a chance. But something inside him, whether it was duty, compassion, or sheer defiance, refused to let him walk away. "Private Thompson, regroup with the others and fall back to Extraction Point Bravo. I'll catch up," David ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Sir, what are you—" Thompson began. But David had already sprinted toward the prince, his rifle blazing. The Oslian assassins were swift, but David was faster. Years of battlefield experience had honed his reflexes, and his aim was precise. He dropped one assassin with a well-placed shot to the chest, then another. The third turned to face him, but David was already on him, slamming the butt of his rifle into the alien's head, knocking him out cold. Panting, David looked down at the prince. Azark's pale blue skin was streaked with blood, and his breathing was labored. His eyes, filled with pain, locked onto David with an expression that was equal parts disbelief and fury. "Why?" the prince rasped, his voice weak but still laced with arrogance. David shook his head, kneeling beside him. Why do this? Azark repeated, his voice growing softer. The question hung in the air between them, charged with all the weight of their people's hatred for one another. I don't know, David admitted. Maybe I'm tired of seeing good soldiers die, even if they're on the wrong side. Azark's lips curled into a faint smile, though it was tinged with bitterness. You, human, you are a fool. Maybe, David replied, pulling out his field medical kit. But right now, you're lucky this fool decided to save you. The prince winced as David applied a makeshift bandage to his wound, stemming the flow of blood. The Oslian armor had absorbed most of the damage, but the prince had taken a hard hit. He wouldn't be able to walk, not without help. I didn't ask for your help, Azark growled, his pride evident even in his weakened state. No, you didn't, David said, hoisting the prince's arm over his shoulder. But I'm giving it anyway. Together they moved through the jungle, the sounds of battle fading behind them. Azark was heavy, his armor weighing them both down, but David didn't complain. His focus was singular: get the prince to safety and figure out the rest later. They stumbled upon a small clearing, and David lowered the prince to the ground, taking a moment to catch his breath. Azark's gaze never left him, a mixture of curiosity and resentment burning in his eyes. You could have left me to die, the prince said after a long silence. No one would have blamed you. David shrugged. Maybe, but I'm not in the habit of leaving people behind, even if they are my enemy. Azark's expression softened, if only for a moment. Perhaps you are not so different from us after all, human. The jungle around them was unnervingly quiet now, the aftermath of battle settling like a heavy fog. David scanned the area, listening for the faint hum of Oslian drones or the telltale shuffle of alien soldiers. But for now, it seemed they were alone. Azark lay against the base of a massive tree, his breathing ragged. David could see the pain etched across the prince's face, but Azark remained silent. Oslian pride ran deep, it seemed. Even in the face of death, the prince would not complain. We need to keep moving, David said, checking the status of his gear. Your people will come looking for you, and my squad won't be able to hold out forever. Azark scoffed, though it was weaker than before. You think you can carry me through this jungle? My weight would only slow you down. Leave me here. David crouched down in front of him, locking eyes with the prince. I didn't go through all that trouble to let you die now. We're getting out of here together. For a long moment, Azark said nothing. Then, with a resigned sigh, he nodded. Very well, human. Lead the way. As they pressed forward through the dense foliage, the hours dragged on, turning into a grueling trek. The jungle was unforgiving, filled with hidden dangers, creatures lurking in the shadows, plants that reacted to their every movement. David was used to it, but Azark, unaccustomed to such terrain, was faltering. The Oslian elite were bred for space combat, not ground skirmishes in hostile environments. Why did you come here? Azark asked suddenly, breaking the silence between them. His voice was strained, and he leaned heavily on David for support. This jungle, this planet, it is not a place for humans. You could have stayed on your ships, fought from the skies. David grunted as he pushed aside a vine. This isn't just a fight for territory, it's survival. Humanity has been on the back foot for too long, underestimated by every major species in the galaxy. We're here because we don't have the luxury of staying behind. Azark mulled over his words, his amber eyes flicking to David's face. And you personally, you fight out of loyalty? For your people? David hesitated. For my people, yes, but also for the people next to me, my squad, my friends. We don't leave each other behind, no matter what. I lost my brother in this war. I won't let anyone else fall if I can help it. A shadow passed over Azark's face, and for a moment the haughty prince was replaced by someone else, a man weighed down by his own burdens. I understand loss, he said quietly. In our culture, there is no greater dishonor than failing to protect one's family. My father would say that you are a fool for risking your life for others. David glanced at him. And you? Azark's lips twitched, as though he were about to smile. Perhaps I think differently now. The jungle began to thin out as they approached a clearing where the crumbled remains of a ruined structure lay half buried in the earth. It was ancient, possibly predating both human and Oslian presence on the planet. David signaled for them to stop, his instincts telling him that something was wrong. Before they could react, a sharp, metallic whirring sound filled the air. David turned just in time to see a group of Oslian soldiers emerge from the shadows, their weapons aimed directly at them. "Prince Azark," the lead soldier called out. His voice was distorted by the helmet, but David could hear the disbelief. "What are you doing with that human?" Azark's expression hardened. He straightened, despite his injuries, and faced the soldiers with a regal air. "This human saved my life," he said, his voice carrying authority despite his exhaustion. "You will stand down." The soldiers hesitated, clearly torn between their loyalty to their prince and their hatred for the human beside him. "Are you deaf?" Azark barked, his commanding tone slicing through the tension. "I said stand down." For a moment, it seemed they would comply, but then the lead soldier, driven by the rigid honor of the Oslian code, shook his head. "We cannot, my prince. The human has defiled your honor by interfering. He must die." David tightened his grip on his rifle, ready for the inevitable confrontation. But Azark stepped forward, placing himself between David and the soldiers. "Any man who dares harm him will answer to me," Azark declared, his voice cold as steel. "He is under my protection." The soldiers exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. But before they could respond, the air was pierced by the sound of a human shuttle roaring overhead. The resistance extraction team had arrived. David looked up, relief flooding through him. But he knew they weren't safe yet. The Oslian soldiers, torn between their orders and their loyalty to their prince, began to advance. "I'm not going to make it," Azark whispered, swaying slightly. His wounds were worse than he had let on. "Leave me. Your people have come for you." David shook his head, his resolve solidified. "Not a chance." A blaster bolt shot through the air, and the final battle erupted. David moved swiftly, shielding Azark as best he could while returning fire. The resistance shuttle swooped down, its doors sliding open to reveal a squad of human soldiers laying down suppressive fire. "Move!" one of them shouted, and David didn't need to be told twice. He dragged Azark toward the shuttle, his legs burning from the effort. Blaster fire ricocheted around them, but he kept his focus on getting the prince to safety. Finally, they reached the shuttle, and with a final heave, David pushed Azark aboard. The doors slammed shut, and the shuttle lifted off, leaving the Oslian soldiers behind. The journey back to the resistance base was quiet. Azark sat slumped against the wall, his eyes half closed, his breathing shallow. The medics worked quickly, stabilizing him for the trip to the medical bay. But it was clear that without David's intervention, he would not have survived. Once they landed, David helped Azark off the shuttle, ignoring the curious looks from his fellow soldiers. To them, Azark was an enemy, a high-ranking officer of the very empire that sought to crush humanity. But to David, the prince had become something else, a comrade, if only for a brief moment. "You saved me again," Azark murmured, as they walked through the base toward the medical wing. "Guess that makes us even," David replied, though he knew the bond between them was far more complicated now. Azark shook his head slowly. "No. In my culture, saving one's life is a debt that cannot be repaid by mere words. It is a bond that goes beyond the battlefield." David glanced at him, unsure of what the prince meant. "What are you saying?" Azark looked up, meeting David's gaze with a steady intensity. "You have earned more than my gratitude, human. You have earned my loyalty, and as per the laws of the Oslian Empire, I am bound to offer you a gift that matches the magnitude of what you've done." David blinked, not understanding. "What kind of gift?" Azark's lips quirked into a faint smile. "My sisters." The words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. David stopped walking, his mind racing. "Your sisters?" he repeated, incredulous. "I'm sorry, what are you talking about?" Azark, despite his weakened state, stood tall, as though this were the most natural conversation in the world. "In Oslian culture, a life saved is a life owed. It is tradition. By saving me, you have earned the highest honor I can bestow, a union between our families. You shall marry my sisters, Liara and Jara." David's mouth opened, but no words came out. His brain was trying to catch up with the sheer weight of what the prince was saying. That's not how things work for us. Azark raised a hand, silencing him. I know your people have different customs, but this is not just about tradition. This is about honor. If you refuse, it will be seen as an insult of the gravest kind. David rubbed the back of his neck, feeling suddenly overwhelmed. He had expected a fight, perhaps some kind of diplomatic fallout, but not this. Look, I respect your culture, but I can't just marry someone I've never met, and two people at that. Azark's gaze softened. You will meet them, and they will have a choice in the matter as well. We are not barbarians, Lieutenant, but the bond we offer is one of respect, not just obligation. The Oslian capital was a place of majestic, cold beauty. Towering spires pierced the sky, each structure a testament to the empire's long and storied history. David had never seen anything like it. The city shimmered with advanced technology, but there was an unmistakable air of rigid tradition. David had been escorted to the royal palace by a group of Oslian guards, still trying to make sense of what was happening. The idea of marrying two alien women he'd never met seemed surreal, even absurd, but there was no denying the gravity of the situation. This was not just some symbolic gesture. It was a serious commitment, one with profound implications for both their people. As they approached the grand hall where he was to meet Princesses Liara and Jara, David's heart pounded in his chest. He was a soldier, used to fighting for survival. But this was something else entirely. He wasn't sure what to expect, and part of him feared what might happen if he couldn't live up to the Oslians' expectations. The doors swung open, revealing a vast chamber filled with regal decorations, ancient tapestries, and a throne at the far end. Standing before the throne were the two women he was to meet, the sisters. Princess Liara was tall and graceful, her blue skin glowing softly in the filtered light of the chamber. She held herself with poise and elegance, her gaze sharp and intelligent. Her younger sister, Jara, was smaller but had a fierce determination in her eyes that reminded David of a soldier about to charge into battle. Both were striking, and their presence immediately commanded the room. Azark, seated on the throne beside their father, Emperor Thalron, watched with a keen interest as David approached. The Emperor's face was unreadable, but David could sense the weight of judgment in the air. You must be Lieutenant Ward, Liara said, her voice smooth, but with an edge that told David she wasn't someone to trifle with. Our brother speaks highly of you. David nodded, unsure of what to say. I don't know how highly I deserve to be spoken of. I just did what I thought was right. Jara tilted her head, studying him closely. Humility from a human. How rare. David chuckled nervously. We have our moments. The tension in the room was palpable, but David wasn't one to shy away from uncomfortable situations. He had fought too many battles to be cowed by a royal court, even if it was alien. I won't pretend I fully understand your customs, David began, glancing between the two sisters, but I'm not here to disrespect your culture, or you. I just want to make sure we all have a say in this. Liara exchanged a glance with Jara before turning back to him. We understand that humans view marriage differently than we do, but know this. Our brother's offer is not merely a formality. If we agree to this union, it will be because we believe it will benefit both our people. David nodded, relieved that the sisters were as pragmatic as they were intelligent. That's all I ask, the Emperor finally spoke, his deep voice reverberating through the hall. Human, you have saved my son's life, and for that, the Oslian Empire is indebted to you. But this union is more than just a repayment of a debt. It is a symbol of trust and cooperation between our species. Should you accept, you will be bound to us in every way. David swallowed hard. This was about more than just him. This was about the future of his people and the Oslian Empire. I understand, David said, standing tall. I'm willing to do what's necessary to honor that bond. The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparation and conversation. David spent time with both Liara and Jara, getting to know them as individuals rather than just political figures. Liara, the older sister, was fiercely intelligent, with a deep understanding of Oslian politics and history. She was a skilled diplomat and strategist, and as the firstborn, she had been groomed for leadership from a young age. Her respect for her brother's decision to offer her hand in marriage was evident, but she also made it clear that she would not simply be a passive participant in the arrangement. Jara, on the other hand, was fiery and independent. She had trained as a warrior, much like Isaac, and had seen combat on the front lines. Her view of the union was more practical. She saw it as a way to strengthen ties between their people, and she admired David's bravery in saving her brother's life. But she was also deeply curious about humans, and often asked David questions about Earth, its cultures, and how humans approached warfare. Despite the unusual circumstances, David found himself drawn to both sisters in different ways. Liara's sharp wit and diplomatic mind intrigued him, while Jara's fiery passion reminded him of the soldiers he fought alongside every day. He had come to respect them both, and though the idea of marriage still felt overwhelming, he understood that this union was about more than just personal feelings. It was about forging a future between two species. As the day of the ceremony approached, David wrestled with his decision. He had come to respect the Oslian people, especially Azark and his sisters, but he was still unsure if this was the right path for him. The weight of responsibility was heavy. This marriage would change the course of his life, and possibly the fate of humanity. Late one night, as he stood on the balcony of his quarters, looking out over the glowing city, he was joined by Azark. "I see the doubt in your eyes," Azark said, leaning against the railing. "You question whether you can live up to this." David sighed. "It's not just about me. This affects more than just us. What if I'm not the right person for this? What if I fail?" Azark smiled faintly. "Failure is not something we plan for, David. You have already proven your worth on the battlefield, and you have earned the respect of my sisters. They are not easy to impress, I assure you." David shook his head. "I never wanted to be part of a royal family, let alone one from a different species. This is a lot to take in." Azark placed a hand on his shoulder. "You saved my life, and by doing so, you have earned a place in our family. Whether you accept it or not, you are one of us now. My sisters see something in you, something I also see. You have the heart of a warrior, but also the compassion of a leader. That is what our people need. That is what the galaxy needs." David looked at Azark, surprised by the depth of his words. He hadn't expected the prince to speak so openly, but there was a sincerity in his voice that couldn't be ignored. "I appreciate that," David said quietly. "I just want to make sure this is the right choice." Azark's expression softened. "It is the only choice. You are not just marrying my sisters, David. You are marrying into a future where humans and Oslian can stand side by side as equals. That is what we fight for." David nodded, the weight of Azark's words settling into his chest. He had always fought for his people, for survival. But this was about more than just survival. This was about building something new. The wedding ceremony was unlike anything David had ever seen. The grand hall of the Oslian palace was filled with dignitaries from across the empire, as well as representatives from the human resistance. The air was thick with anticipation, and as David stood at the front of the hall, flanked by Liara and Jara, he felt the enormity of the moment. The ceremony was a blend of Oslian tradition and human influence, a symbol of the union that would change the course of the galaxy. Azark stood by his side, a proud smile on his face, while the Emperor watched with an air of approval. As the final vows were spoken, David looked at Liara and Jara, feeling a sense of connection that went beyond words. This was not a marriage born of love in the traditional sense, but of respect, trust, and a shared vision for the future. He had come to care for both sisters in ways he hadn't expected, and though the path ahead was uncertain, he knew they would face it together. After the ceremony, as the festivities continued late into the night, David found a quiet moment with Liara and Jara. They stood on the palace balcony, looking out over the city, the glow of the Oslian spires reflecting off their faces. "This isn't what I expected," David admitted, a soft chuckle escaping him. Liara smiled. "Nor us, but perhaps that is what makes it worthwhile. Jara leaned against the railing, her gaze fixed on the stars. The galaxy is changing, David. We are part of something bigger than ourselves now. David nodded, feeling the weight of her words. The war still raged on, but this union had created something new, an alliance that could change the course of history. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was part of a family, part of a future that held the potential for peace, for cooperation between species that had once been enemies. I think we can make this work, David said, his voice filled with quiet determination. Liara placed a hand on his arm. Together we will. The following weeks were filled with diplomatic meetings and strategic discussions. The marriage between David and the two Oslian princesses had sparked interest and controversy across the galaxy, but it had also opened doors for dialogue between humanity and the Oslian Empire. The resistance leaders were cautious, but they couldn't deny the potential benefits of such an alliance. As for David, he found himself growing closer to Liara and Jara with each passing day. Their relationship was still unconventional by human standards, but they had forged a bond based on mutual respect and shared purpose. They were partners in every sense of the word, and together they began to navigate the complexities of their new roles as symbols of a fragile peace. But the road ahead was far from easy. The war continued, and there were still those within the Oslian Empire who opposed the Union. David knew they would face challenges, both from within and without, but for the first time, he felt hope. Hope that together they could build something better than what had come before. Months later, David stood on the bridge of a human Oslian coalition ship, watching as a fleet of vessels moved through the stars. Liara and Jara stood beside him, their presence a steadying force as they prepared for the next phase of their mission. "Are you ready?" Liara asked, her voice calm and assured. David smiled. "As ready as I'll ever be." Jara smirked. "Good, because this is only the beginning." As the ship surged forward, leaving the remnants of the old galaxy behind, David knew they were heading into uncharted territory. But with Liara and Jara by his side, and the strength of their people behind them, he was ready to face whatever came next. Together, they would carve out a new future, one built on trust, sacrifice, and the belief that even the most unlikely of bonds could change the galaxy forever.